Floss live video here, fighting for New Zealand in exile. And let me just fix this up for a minute. I think I've got that on there. Right, just a moment. I've got multiple screens going here. All right, that's on live there. That should just come up there, I think. All right, well, I'm just going to do it from here. So if you're on YouTube there, you'll be able to see me. Just come on for a surprise. You know what I'm like with my surprise videos. You can come on and watch it. I'm going to be doing my Zoom, and I'm going to be showing up the things on my Zoom. But for those of you that can't see my Zoom, if you can check in to see the Zoom if you want to, and you'll be able to see the pictures. But I'll be posting the Zoom picture later. This is a great call out to England, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, and New Zealand. We are at war, and the problems that are going on in our countries are no different to the problems that we experienced way back in the 1830 in the Jacobites, and the Irish were calling us the German lairdies. The German lairdies. Now, the 1688 Bill of Rights came to power in that time, and presently the Jacobites have moved on in, and they're trying to have it removed. And we're going to show you today, I'm going to show you a little bit today, we're going to go back over a little bit of history of our countries. It's important. The main countries that have got declarations are in Scotland, England, Ireland, Germany, and New Zealand. But England's the glue that holds it all together, but New Zealand is the glue that cements the whole thing. We've got a thing in New Zealand called the Treaty of Waitangi, and they've changed the treaty. They've changed many of our laws to counteract the laws that were made over in England and Scotland and Northern Ireland in 1688, sorry. So I'm going to go to my first, now I'm in the courts. I've petitioned the King, our 1688 Bill of Rights. Should be able to post up on here, on my chat there. If you see up on my chat, there. I have to take out some vocabulary, and I should be able to put also on my chat the Zoom meeting. All right, let me just do that for you. There we go. So I can post that up there. Right, so you can join the Zoom meeting if you want to. I don't really want anybody in here talking, but if you want to join in to see the pictures, you should be able to click on that if that's what you want to do. So we're going to go, I'm in the court, and we've made it to the Supreme Court, and we've asked for a declaration to King Charles III. But before we could do that, we've got to go back and do a little bit of history. Now, just remember that I'm just doing the fly off the by here. So I'm trying to make it as interesting for you as possible, and I'll try to talk as fast as I can. Nobody wants to sit through the long videos. So we're going to go and have a look here to my papers. Right, what you'll see here is the Supreme Court. that I've entered into the Supreme Court, and I've put all the documents that started with the lower court. I started in the lower court, and then I got struck out in the lower court. I appealed that. I appealed that to the Appeals High Court, and then I got hit with $10,000 in fees in order to go to the court to petition the king. And I appealed the fees because it says under the 1688 Bill of Rights that it is the right of the subject to petition the king. So I appealed the fees, and then I lost that case, and then that case has gone to the Supreme Court. Now, what has happened in this Supreme Court is that I want to show to you the various declarations that we had in New Zealand, that when the ships all came out. So while you were fighting over there, so we'll go here to the Declaration of Abroth. Now, let's go right back to Germany, where it all started. All right, we'll go right back to Germany. Now, this man here is a man called Martin Luther. Now, you can go and Google Martin Luther at any time that you want to. And Martin Luther was the person. So he wrote the Bible from Latin into the German language, and then it was quickly translated into English. The English language comes from the groups of Germanic languages. So all the English, the Scottish, and the Irish languages come from a group of languages called the Germanic languages. All right, so you all come out of that area. And so all English people are descended from Anglo-Saxon tribes from over in Germany there. Luther renounced the Catholic and Jewish doctrines, and he created a thing called the neutral Protestant people. We were the people that we didn't want to be confined by their religions. We didn't want to pay their tithes, and we didn't want to pay them for their indulgences. And then we didn't want to be abused by their rituals and dictator laws and their tortures. If you spoke against either one of the churches, you had your tongue cut out. If you often had to give blowjobs and things to priests in order to get your sins forgiven. They said that in order for you to be forgiven, you had to go through one of their preachers. But Martin Luther said no. Martin Luther said each and every one of us is divine in our own right. We can go to the God on our own. And that's how it came to be the Supreme Courts. That's why I'm saying we're going to the heavenly realm, because the Supreme Court was created. You think it was created to get criminals or to help the Parliament, but it wasn't. It was created so that you, as an individual, could go to the court and hold the government to account. Now, I'll better say this just for a minute here, is that originally, oh no, we're not up to Magna Carta. We'll get to Magna Carta in a minute. So King Edward the Eighth was actually called King Edward Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. He was the great grandson of Queen Victoria, and he supported Hitler. Now, a lot of you might not realize this, but all Queen Victoria, all of them were German kings and German queens. And the Prince of Orange and the Princess of Orange, Princess Mary, they were Protestant and they were Germans, and they've been raised in the Protestant neutral. You don't even have to call it religion. It was just called the neutral people that didn't want to be under the doctrines of the church, and they were imported from Germany, right? And King Edward, when Germany went to war, King Edward, they say that he abdicated and went with Wallace to live over there, but he actually supported Hitler, and I'm thinking that he didn't want to fight against his own people because he was a very new English king. In an actual fact, because only he had his father Before that was Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria directly out of Germany, and then his father as the buffer, born to England. And so he's my grandfather is German from New Zealand, and I'm still very connected to all of that line. And so I think he didn't want to fight against his own people, as my grandparents didn't leave New Zealand to fight against their own people either. So that was King Edward Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. All right, that's his real name. Let's get real here, shall we? Now, on the 31st of October, now these dates are going to be important. In 1517, the legend says that Luther nailed 95 theses to the door of the church, saying, forgiveness could not be bought by tithes, but given freely from God alone. In January 1518, his friends translated his thesis into German, and then they sent out to France, England, and Italy after they also translated it into English in all those languages. The freedom of the Christian Protestant from the church's doctrines had begun. That starts with Martin Luther, all right? Now, you're going to see why I need to tell you all this. Now, the next one is this very strange document, and this is called the Declaration of Abroth. Now, this is where you're going to see New Zealand history and the Northern Irish history and the Scottish history, the English history, the German history, all start to join together in a group of histories. And the battle has always been, for all of our countries, the battle has always been the Catholics and the Jews have always wanted to get all of us under their doctrines, and the Protestants have always wanted to be free of that, have our own courts, have our own self-governance by Parliament. So now the Magna Carta came out in 1215. So this declaration of Abroth apparently came out in 1320. Now, when the Magna Carta was first produced, a lot of people, you better go and read that Magna Carta. I'm telling you something. Go and read the preamble, because it really just does seriously say to you that it's the kings and the bishops and the religious leaders will rule the country. The kings will be under the popes, and then under the kings would be all the barons. And then everybody else under that was just a slave, unless you belong to the Catholic religion or the Jewish religion. But if you were not inside one of those two religions, you were considered to be peon slaves, and you were the dirt of the earth. You weren't allowed to own your land, although it did belong to you. It was all taken from you. Now, in that Magna Carta, it gave the barons, it said that the barons could set up courts in their towns, and then if the kings or the popes didn't listen to the barons, the kings and the popes would force the people to fight against the kings and the popes. So it would be either way, they were lost. If they were fighting against the barons, the kings and the popes could not help the people. And if the people had done anything to upset the barons, the kings and popes would force the people to support them, even if they didn't want to. Now, at that point in time, this is in 1217. When was Martin Luther? See, Martin Luther was around in 1517. Oh, no. Oops, wrong one. Yes, 1517. So 1517 was Martin Luther. But 1215 was the Magna Carta, right? But the Magna Carta, so what they had said to the people is that if you want to get to the king to protest to the king or protest to the parliament or protest, you've got to go through the barons, and then the barons will come and protest to the king, and then the king will protest to the pope. That's how you had to do it. So it's very dependent in your town if you could get along with your barons, or if you could get past the barons, which was a very, very difficult thing to do. But so that's what happened. That was all set up by the Magna Carta. In 1688, all that was gone, and they said that the people would be the rulers. Actually, the people would be the rulers over Queen and Parliament. Everybody's going to be accountable. Queens are going to be accountable, kings are going to be accountable, people are going to be accountable, barons are going to be accountable. And then they put a thing in the 1688 that said that we all had the right to petition the king. And the set of rules on the 1688 was given to Parliament. And it said to Parliament, you can govern over the people on the condition that you follow these natural laws of Almighty God, is what was said. And it said if you don't do that, then you'll be removed. And the king himself, the Prince and Princess of Orange, they needed to sign that before they were permitted to take their throne back. So they also had to sign it, and they also are bound to govern us by that 1688 Bill of Rights. And if they don't, then they have to be removed. But you're going to be wondering where I'm going with this. We're going to be getting to the Supreme Court in a minute, because I'm going to show you what they've done. We're going to be learning about the thing called changing the pilot. What they've done is change the pilot of the plane. Once you figure it all out, you can actually get a really clear picture of where you need to go. So that's 1215, right? So you go there, you've got Martin Luther. 1215, you've got Magna Carta. 1518, you've got Martin Luther, and he just went right against the church. There was a lot of fighting going on over in Germany with the Protestant Germans, and England had brought in thousands of Protestant Germans into England to battle against the religions themselves, because they didn't know how to get them out. So they brought in the Protestant Germans. Unfortunately for them, they brought in too many. The Protestant Germans outnumbered the English and the Scottish and the Irish. And so a big battle ensued there to get rid of the Protestant Germans as well. But England, Scotland, and Ireland were also having problems with the Catholic and the Jewish. And so all those things were going on, and they were called Jacobites. So this here is called the Declaration of Abroth, which was apparently, now is not even considered to be absolutely and utterly true. It isn't. It was apparently written in 1320, and it was unmentioned by Scotland's major 16th century historians, but it mysteriously turned up in 1680, just right before the Prince of Orange and Princess of Orange were being brought over. This Declaration of Abroth mysteriously turned up. And now, the Declaration of Abroth was written for the Jacobite kings. So presently, we have got a Protestant king, but here's a little piece of information for you. All right, I forget all my kings, but a fact of the matter is that some of the kings were thrown out and the Protestant king was brought in. And so you had a Protestant king and a Jacobite king, and the Jacobite king who was thrown out to bring in the Prince and Princess of Orange, right? That battle for that Jacobite king to be brought back to Scotland is what's going on right here, right now in 2022. It never ended, this battle that's been going on. It's never ended, right? So it gets a little bit confusing, but I'm trying my best to explain it all to you and then bring you up to what's going on for us in New Zealand. I'll just try my best here. So the Jacobite king was thrown out, and James the something, and then the Protestant German prince and princess came in to take over. Okay, and so those Jacobites are the ones that wrote this Declaration of Abroth, and they were thrown out of Scotland eventually. Okay, so they came under, they wanted to choose their own king, and they called him King Bruce. And in the present day, they're trying to bring in the descendants of the Jacobite kings to rule over Scotland, and they're trying to get Northern Ireland back as a republic with the Catholic Ireland. So it's got Protestant Ireland and Catholic Ireland. They're trying to bring them back under the Catholic Ireland, right? And then at some point, all those people, all those Jacobites, Catholics, Jews, Jehovah's Witness, Latter-day Saints, whatever you want to call them, they all went out into America and New Zealand and Australia. But they really turned up in New Zealand and caused quite a bit of havoc. And that's who's causing all the havoc in New Zealand to this day, now in this time, in this present 2022 year. All right. So you're going to see why in a minute. So they were called the missionaries. Now there's two sets of missionaries. There are good missionaries, and then there are the not so good missionaries that wanted all the lands. All right. I better not go into that, but I better stay focused here. I'll try and put it right. So the 16th century historians mysteriously, the 1320 Declaration of Abroth mysteriously turned up in 1680, a few years before the 1688 Will and Mary, that gave power to the Protestant people. Robert the Bruce apparently delivered the Scottish nation from English peril. They were named Jacobites, and he was called a Jacobite king. Now these dates are important. In 1829, conservation staff resurfaced it and preserved it for all times to come. It was re-engraved by William Home Lizzes and Daniel Lizzes in 1815. They were a husband and a wife, I think, or they may have been two brothers, I'm not sure. But they re-engraved it. Now this 1815 is extremely, extremely important date for you to remember. So they believed that the kings could be chosen at will by the people and not need to be under the limitations to themselves by Almighty God. So they wanted a king that could be chosen, but the king would still be absolute over the people. And he was backed by the Jews and the Catholics, but were all kings at that point. Even Jesus was crowned by the Catholics and the Jews. So that's where the crowns all come from, all the way back to Jesus. So that you've got this going on with Martin Luther, and you've got this going on with this Declaration of Abroth. It's not even sure that it's a true document. They're saying that it is. Now the next document, you see this date here that you've got here, 1815. Now we're going to jump over to New Zealand, going to ask ourselves what was going on in New Zealand. Well, in 1814, a man called Samuel Marsden, who had been ruling over New South Wales and Australia, he was a missionary. They were actually Jehovah's Witnesses, but they had asked the church for their own shipping company, and the church had turned them down. He was actually eventually sacked from the actual Church Missionary Society. He was sacked. They were all sacked, but many of them were reinstated because they needed the language speakers. But he was originally sacked. But anyway, Samuel Marsden turns up in 1814. They scoop up two of the chiefs, Ruatara and Hongihika. They eventually go over to England in 1820. They go to a university called the Magna University. There they meet up with the French prince who had been exiled from France. He and Thomas Kendall gave, I think it was, don't quote me on numbers, 40,000 acres of land to this, the French Prince Philippe, I think his name was, Tyree, I know his last name, Tyree. So they gave him 40,000 hectares of land, And he in return gave them 1,000 muskets. Not only that, the king gave them a suit of armor, gave Hongi Hika a suit of armor. Now they all reckon that this was all innocent and that the Anglo people in England were not doing anything, but let's just not go there. That's another video that I did a long time ago. But anyway, what did they do there? In 1820, the New Zealand native Aboriginal language was translated, was put into text. So they never had a written language before. And so when it was put into text, this is no different from what happened in Germany. When all the Bibles, Catholic Bibles, were in Latin, the people couldn't read them. If the people couldn't read them, they weren't able to establish laws for themselves or own lands or anything like that, because they were considered as being not existing. They didn't exist. They were not subjects. They were invisible, no different from a tiger in the jungle. That's what they were. And so it wasn't, when it was translated into English, they were able to read. When they were able to read, they noticed that the Catholics and the Jews and the Islamists all had laws to protect themselves, and then all had laws for abusing and slaughtering the people that were not in their religions. So that's how the Protestant religion was born. It was a religion of protection from the three barbarous religions that were killing them and torturing them. And so the Aboriginals in New Zealand were no different, but they went over there. When they got the language of the Peshitta, which I think that was Catholic, and the Jacobite language, the Book of Job. I think they got canon law and Jewish law translated into their language, because that was Jehovah's Witness and Catholics. And so they brought that translated text into New Zealand, and that was done in the first dictionary was in 1815. The first native Aboriginal New Zealand dictionary was 1815, which was all of the vocabulary. The second one was in 1820, which is putting together the structure under the two religious texts, which gave them law. That's what it gave them, law. And their LAW, law. Now then, out of that, in 1835, this declaration was called the Declaration of Independence of New Zealand. This was created in 1835, 15 years later. Now, this declaration is as dubious as the Declaration of Abroth. You could probably Google them and you'll probably find that they turn up almost exactly the same paper, the same kind of things, very similar. And this Declaration of Independence, called in English, it's called the Whakaputang. In Maori, it's called Whakaputang. This turned up in around about the year 2000. It has never been seen, never been cited, not rarely been mentioned, but it turned up suddenly in the year 2000. Now, it's not a bad declaration, because it does actually say here that the sovereign power and the authority within the territories of the United Tribes of New Zealand is hereby declared to reside entirely and exclusively in the hereditary chiefs and heads of tribes in their collective capacity. Now, this is very important. So it said that the heads of the tribes and the heads of the chiefs, they had to be hereditary, which means they had to be born to the tribe and born as hereditary chiefs on the land, all right? And they're also declared that they will not permit any legislative authority separate from themselves in their collective capacity to exist. So they were not going to let any legislation to exist, nor any function of any government will be exercised within these territories. Here's the kicker. It says, unless by persons appointed by them. Now, at this point, they had appointed the missionaries and the Catholic Church as their caregivers. Now, I have found a document, but I'm not going to show it today because it's too much. But it does say in this original document that they had asked the missionaries to help them to create laws for their country, and the missionaries turned their backs on them. The missionaries, as soon as this Declaration of Independence was signed, they divided up the entire country, and they got all the lands. They found the most easiest chiefs that they could manipulate, and they manipulated them to sell all the lands to these missionaries. Samuel Marsden, William Williams, and George Clark had bought and Busby had bought all the lands. They bought almost the entire South Island and most of the North Island. And that's all what they owned in their corporation that they had set up over there in New South Wales. So that when the natives started to realise that they'd been duped, that's when they called in Queen Victoria from over in England. Now this is going to be interesting for you because the king, the Queen Victoria, was not the same as the Jacobite king. So the kings, no, that's a lie. Right, we had King's Bench in, King's Bench went right through until 1820 was King's Bench law, all right? And then Queen Victoria was born in 1820. And the Butterworth uncle and son separated. King's Bench law split into another one called Queen's Bench law, which was the nephew of Butterworth. And then I think it's Henry Butterworth who did the Queen's Bench. And then he, for 17 years, worked in the Queen's Bench, and he wrote the Queen's Bench law specifically for Queen Victoria, who took the throne in 1837. She took the throne in 1837. Now, this is going to be interesting. Tamati Wakanene, the New Zealand paramount chief, he was eventually elected as the paramount chief. He joined up secretly with Queen Victoria, right? And they threw all these missionaries out. And they created this thing called the Treaty of Waitangi. Now, this Declaration of Independence is very important for New Zealand, because what you'll see here is it says, so there's 3 articles here, Article 1, 2, and 3. This is saying that they are the chiefs of the tribes and that this is their country and they're an independent country. They didn't realise when they did that, they were no longer, and they got their own flag. Unfortunately, the missionaries had tricked them into getting a flag. When they did that, they became people in their own right, under laws in their own right, because they had a written language, and then all the lands could be bought and stolen. They could be cheated for all of their lands. That's what happened. Now, one of the things, now why is this very good to the Anglo-Protestant people of New Zealand? Because it says they also agree to send a copy of this declaration to His Majesty, the King of England, to thank him for his acknowledgement of their flag. Now, the King didn't sign this, right? And it's not sealed by the King. It's not the same as the Declaration of Abroth. It was never signed by a king. It was never sealed by a king. And the reason why it was never signed or sealed by a king is because they still didn't have a paramount king to say, this is where our power is vested. This is what it sits on. Lord Denning, if you go and look at Lord Denning, he said, it's something can't sit on nothing. If you're going to have a declaration or or some kind of law, it has to sit on something of power, and that power has to be very strong. Like our power sits on the courts and the parliament and the king, so, and the governor general. We've got multiple areas where the power is sat to keep checks on everybody. But a power, you can't just get a piece of paper. I could get a piece of paper, write it now. Oh shit, just dropped my phone. I just got a piece of paper. I can get a piece of paper and I can write all these rules and put it on a nice piece of parchment and take it out and say to all of you people, this is now the law and you're all going to follow it. And who's going to follow Kate Floss? Nobody. Yeah. So the power must be vested in something of strength, of power, castles, kings, queens, these kinds of things. So the New Zealand natives didn't have that, so that's why the king never signed this. But it only says here that they will thank him for the flag. But here's what's important. It says, in return for the friendship and protection they have shown and are prepared to show to such of his subjects as have settled in their country. And what this means is that they recognised the subject status, and they recognised that there was a king. They recognised there was a king, and that was where all the power came from, was vested in. And then they recognised that the people under the king were subjects, which meant that they existed as people, and they existed in a law. And the law that they had to follow to protect us by, because they had no laws, was the 1688 Bill of Rights, that they could make any subordinate laws that they wanted to, any customary laws that they wanted to, but they knew that the 1688 Bill of Rights was the protection for the people, Anglo people that were living in New Zealand, and that was recognised in this Declaration of Independence. So that, I'm just going to tell you that this is very important, because they went on in the future to give the authority to Queen Victoria. So the authority went to Queen Victoria, and then the King's Bench closed down in 1837, and the Queen's Bench took power. But what happened is that the Jacobite king wanted to come back, didn't he? And so there's been a battle since 1837 to this day to put a Jacobite king back in charge of Scotland. That's what they're up to. And in fact, and in charge of New Zealand as well. They want to put a Jacobite king back in charge over the Protestant people. So that's the battle that's going on today. They recognise that. Now, we're going to go and show you something. Now, let's see. So that all happened in 1835. 1837, Queen Victoria joined up with Tamati Wakanene to get the Jacobite king out of New Zealand. So they'd already got them. They got them out of Germany. They got them out of England. They got them out of Northern Ireland. Got them out of Scotland. They all jumped over to America, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. But then America did their Declaration of Independence, and everyone that went in there was an alien, right? And now I've got a bit lost here. All right, turn your camera off, Maxine, so I don't want to be distracted. Do you mind? All right. Right. So so then what happened? Now I've lost my place. Hell. All right. So they all came out. So America made the Declaration of Independence, and they threw out the Protestant king and the Protestant laws, and they brought in the inalienable laws. All right. Now they've turned up in New Zealand in this present day with the Latter-day Saint religion to take over New Zealand. And they're also, by the human rights, are also in Scotland, with Paul Hunt, and they're also in Northern Ireland, and they're also in England, trying to bring in a new Jacobite king and get rid of the 1688 Bill of Rights that they think holds too much power. So then I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to go and let you know where we are in the courts right now. So that's where we are, those two declarations of independence. Keep those in mind. Now I'm going to go to a thing called the Bill of Rights, 1688. And this is going to be important for you to see, because on this Bill of Rights, 1688, if you go and have a look here, did I share it? I'll have to share it. Hang on. Oh. Right, I'll go to share. Right, so if you go and look at this Bill of Rights, 1688, what you're going to see here is an important thing. Very, very important, this. And it's important that you read it carefully and understand what it says and what it means for you as people, as you know, because I'm an English, I'll just have a little rave on here. I'm an English teacher, a fake one, to be honest, but I'm an English teacher. And when you teach English, one of the things, a sentence can't exist unless it has a subject. You have to be a subject to exist. Something needs to have a name. If a country doesn't have a name, it doesn't exist. If a person doesn't have a name, it doesn't exist. As you always, and then in the 1688 Bill of Rights, our name is subject. And it just means that we are a person in our own right, our own person, our own divine birth, that we exist. That's what it's saying, is that we exist. And then under Almighty God, these are the rights that we have from Almighty God. And if they don't uphold those rights, we're permitted to go to the court, but they've been blocking us from going to the court, and I'm going to show you why soon. You bear with me. So that we have the right to petition, that it is the right of the subjects to petition the king, and all commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. Now, this is extremely, extremely important, because they've been making people, they're not letting people go into the court to prosecute the parliamentarians, to call them into the court, to hold them accountable. The only means that you're permitted to do that is by petitioning the king. So you go to the court, you make your petition to the king, and then all commitments and all prosecutions for doing that are illegal. So they're not allowed to make you pay for that, and they're not allowed to prosecute for doing that. And this is what's happened to me in the court. Not only did they prosecute me for doing that, they're also making me pay thousands and thousands of dollars to get my declaration. And I have entered the Supreme Court to say to them, to petition the king to say to them that they are wrong. We're waiting for the Supreme Court. You'll hear about that in a minute. Now, along with this, that we see here, that you know from Lord Denning, that something it has to sit on something. Something can't sit on nothing, right? So you've got to be stood on something, even if it's your feet are stood on the land. Something must be stood on something. And so you have your shelf, which is the king, right? And then you have the 1688 that's rested on the king. That's where it's sat. So his power comes from you. And then he gave that power to the parliament, and he said, you can govern the people, but only if you follow these rules. And then if you don't follow them, the people, the lowly people like me, have got the right to come and petition that. all right? So we can petition it, and you're not allowed to make them pay for that, and you're not allowed to prosecute for them for that. So that's sat on Parliament, which is sat on the King. The King sometimes sat on Parliament. Parliament, it's all sat on each other. The courts are all sat on there, right? And then that would be called the pilot, right? Now I want you to listen carefully to me. That is the pilot, but it's got to have something else to sit on to get it to travel. So you need it to be able to travel freely. So then you go to the declaratory. Can you see my screen? Yes. So then you go to this thing here called the Declaratory Judgment Act. So this, we're going to call it the plane. So you've got a pilot and a plane. And here is the plane. Now this plane is very even more important than the pilot. This is the plane that's going to fly your pilot. So your pilot and the plane can't fly without the pilot, and the pilot can't use his power and control without the plane. You need a driver and you need a vehicle. You need both of them, and neither can function without the other. All right. So very important law here, because then it's saying here, have a listen, it says, no action or proceeding in the High Court shall be open to objection or ground that merely a declaratory judgment order is sought. So that means, and the said court may make binding declarations of right, whether there's going to be consequential relief or not. So you can just go in there. You're supposed to be able to just go in there, petition your rights, and it's petitioned through the King. You petition through the King, so therefore there's no commitments and no prosecutions, and you should be able to ask them about your questions of law. My question of law that I had was that the Human Rights Act, Section 5, subsection 2 KII says New Zealand will be bound to any international instrument. Now, this applies over there in Scotland, Ireland, and England. All of you, you've all been going through the same thing for the last 40 years. So I'm coming in to clear it all up for you, we hope. We're very dependent on what the Supreme Court's going to say, so we won't know. So then it goes on to say that any person that desires to do any act or to look at the validity or the legality or the effect of or construction of any act, any bylaw, any deed, any will, any document, any agreement, any memorandum, any article, any association, any body corporate, any instrument. If you only are interested, it says here, where any person claims that they are interested in the construction or the validity of that law, that person may apply to the High Court for a declaratory order to say what the correct law is. So I hope everybody's keeping up with me. All right. Now we've got this Treaty of Waitangi. Now, the original Treaty of Waitangi if you're over in Scotland, you've got treaties over there. Go and look at your treaties, and you've got to check these sneaky people, because they're very sneaky about what they're going to do. The Treaty of Waitangi was considered to be an nullity. It was never, the only time the courts can use their powers is when they've been given an act or a law that came out of Parliament that had been ascended to the King. So the Parliament, you vote the Parliament in, they decide on a bill or they decide on a law. The people, you tell the Parliament, we want this law, we want that law, complain about this, and they go and make the laws for you. So they're paramount. And then they have to ascend that to the King. The King says, that's good, you can have that law if you want to. That goes down, and then that goes out into the neighbourhood, and the courts work with that, all right, with those laws that they're given. Now, in that's what I was saying. The Treaty of Waitangi was never passed by an act of Parliament. The only thing that was passed by an act of Parliament was the German Settlers Act, the Scottish Settlers Act. There were a few ships. There were some ships that came out of Germany, Scotland, Ireland with the New Zealand Company, and there were a few paramount chiefs that went and declared themselves subjects of the Queen, and they were not aliens on the land. They declared themselves subjects. And I've taken my declaration that I have from my German Settlers Act, and I put it into the courts, and I said, even though I'm a citizen, I'm also a subject. And this is important to be considered to be a subject, because the Treaty of Waitangi never passed as an act of Parliament. So therefore, it was an nullity. Queen's Law came into New Zealand on January the 14th, 1840. It was a month before February the 6th, the Treaty of Waitangi. But however, the Treaty of Waitangi was never considered to be a legal document at that time. Neither was the Declaration of Independence, because they were not passed, neither of them were passed by an act of Parliament. And so if they weren't passed by an act of Parliament, then they were a nullity. Now in 1975, they turned around and got that Treaty of Waitangi, and they went and created this thing here called the Treaty of Waitangi Act, is what they created. Hope everybody can, there, I've made that bigger now. Does that make better? Probably makes better. Right, now this is very important that you go and look here, because I want you to read here. Now you remember the declaratory judgment where it said anybody can go to the court. Then you go to your Bill of Rights where you can see that it's the right to petition the king and nobody can stop you, right? Then you go over here to your Treaty of Waitangi Act, and you look here on section now it's 6, I think. Where is 6? There. This is the jurisdiction of tribunal to consider claims. Now, I want you to look here carefully, because it says where any Maori claims that he or any group of Maoris of which he is a member or is likely to be prejudicially affected by any act, any regulations, any order in council for the time being enforced by any policy or any practice adopted by or on behalf by any act which are in the commencement of this act is done or omitted or is proposed to be done or omitted on behalf of the Crown, and that the act, regulations or order in council or the policy, practice or act is inconsistent with the principles of the treaty, he may submit a claim. And then it says, he may submit a claim. Now, this one here is very different from the actual one that they legislated. So this is the one that ascended to the Governor General, but the actual one that they legislated is very, very different from this. So keep still in your mind my plane and my pilot. So all Anglo people were protected by the pilot of the 1688 and the plane of the 1908 Declaratory Judgment Act. All people in New Zealand were protected by that, right? So we had a pilot and we had a plane. Now you'll see here, so this, the Maori did not have they didn't have a plane or a pilot because the Treaty of Waitangi had not been made by an act of Parliament. And so it had no power over them. However, the Queen's Law came to New Zealand on January the 14th, and all powers over the Anglo people and the ships that were brought into New Zealand upon the signing of the treaty, all Anglo people were under those protections. The Maori were actually not. They still governed themselves, right? So that's why they said that it would be a good idea to make this Treaty of Waitangi an act of Parliament. So that's what they did, and then they gave the Maori the same right as the Declaratory Judgment Act that was created in 1908. So the Declaratory Judgment Act, 1908, German settlers ordinance that made all German settlers subjects under the protections of the Majesty, and 1688 Bill of Rights that arrived in New Zealand on the 14th of January 1840. That was the plane and the pilot and the passengers, right? So, and then the Maori only got that plane and pilot and passengers. They really got that in 1975 because the treaty only ever said if they would concur. And they concurred by an act of Parliament in 1975. Now this, if you look at this document here, the actual proper one, you'll see that on section 9, that it says that it is the right to petition Parliament. The right to petition Parliament is unaffected. Nothing in this Act shall affect any right, any way, the right of any person to petition Parliament for a redress of their grievances or the jurisdiction of any committee or other body set up by Parliament to deal with petition to Parliament. Now, the Supreme Court is set up by Parliament to deal with petitions, and when you want to question the laws that they've made, you go to the Supreme Court, and they are the body that is set up by Parliament to allow you don't need to go through the barons, you don't need to go through any letters, you as a subject can go on your very own, as I have done. And so, but the new Treaty of Waitangi Act is very, very different, because that Treaty of Waitangi Act includes both the New Zealand Maori and their rights and the Anglo people with their ordinances and their rights, and the 1908. So all they've done is they had put a new pilot into the plane. So our plane had 2 pilots instead of 1. So we had 2. We had all of the settlers that had their ordinances. They were pilot number 1 together with the Queen. And then in 1975, the Maoris came in as a pilot as well. But we had the same plane, right? And we got the same chief pilot, lieutenant pilot, so to speak. So we had 2 lower level top pilots, and then we had a chief pilot, which is the king, right? And then we had our plane. And so everybody was very happy about that. Now, in the Treaty of Waitangi Act, 1975, they changed it. Very, very sneaky thing. What they did is they completely changed it. They said, where any Maori claims that he, she, or any groups of Maoris, any members, by any is likely to be affected by any ordinance of the General Legislative Council, ordinance of the Provincial Legislative Council, New Munster, or any provincial ordinance or act, whether or not still in force or passed at any time after February 1840, by any regulations, any order, any notice, any instrument, any policy, any practice adopted by any act done or omitted or proposed, here's what it doesn't say. And that the ordinance or act or the regulations, order, notice, or the policy or the act was or inconsistent with the principles of the treaty, he or she may submit that claim to the Waitangi Tribunal under this section. So you see here that in this one here, they got that very similar to section 6, except for they've added a few bits and pieces, right? They've got theirs. And then here's ours down here, right? Now look here. They have put in all this stuff, and ours, oh, I have to go over there. They have put in all this stuff. Oh, ours is down here. Ours is still here, but ours was changed in 1986 because they said that Section 9 was replaced in 1986 with the new Constitution, and ours was actually taken out of the Treaty of Waitangi Act. So basically what they've done is changed the pilot of the plane. First, we had the Anglo Ordnance settlers as the pilots of the plane. Then they created 2 pilots of the plane. And then in 1986, they threw us out. That's what they've done. Sneaky buggers. So this is why nobody's been able. Thanks, Maxine. I just saw that. I needed that. Thank you. All right. So what has happened is they've changed the pilot of the plane, and they wrote a whole bunch of laws. The 2016 Appeals Court Act, the 2003 Judicature Act, and all of those, many things that I've read that some of you that are knowledgeable know about, but I know about them, but I won't tell you. So basically what they've done is this section here was removed in 1986, and we were no longer, but the sneaky wee beggars, because they did, they kept theirs, you see, so theirs is all matched up, and they've kept all of their treaty and their 1688, because the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi can be read. If you read the Treaty of Waitangi, the actual, I'll go to view whole, what it says in the Treaty of Waitangi is that whereas, I have to get the correct treaty here. Make sure you get the right one because they're right. So this Treaty of Waitangi said that she would come for the peace and good order in consequence of the great number of Her Majesty's subjects who've already settled in New Zealand, the extension of immigration from Europe and Australia, and is to constitute and appoint a functionary to treat with the Aborigines for the recognition of sovereignty. Her Majesty, therefore, being desirous to establish a civil government to view the evil consequences which must result from the necessary laws and institutions alike to the native population and to her subjects. So she's got in there native population and subjects, which is us, but there's a little bit here because then it goes on to say she's been gracious graciously pleased to empower and to authorise William Hobson, a captain in His Majesty's Naval Consul and Lieutenant Governor of such parts of New Zealand as may or hereafter shall be ceded to, here's what it says, to invite the Confederated and Independent Chiefs of New Zealand to concur. Now, that wasn't the case for the Anglo people, but only asked the natives if they would concur. And they concurred in 1975. But after they concurred, the Treaty of Waitangi was instituted by an Act of Parliament, making it in law. But the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi are all in here. But you'll see that the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi include the Majesty's subjects as well as the natives, because we came first. Don't you see that? And it must be so, because at the time of the 1908 Declaratory Judgment Act, the Treaty of Waitangi had not been passed by an Act of Parliament. Neither had the Declaration of Independence, none of them. So they were not recognised in law by anyone. And the only laws that were recognised in New Zealand was the 1908 Declaratory Judgment Act, which went along with the 1908 Judicature Act. That was the plain. The 1844 German settlers ordinance that made them all subjects, and the Scottish ordinance and the Irish ordinances that made them subjects. That was one of the pilots. And then we had the 1688 Bill of Rights, which was the big hoo-ha of the whole thing. And they sat in the plain, and that's how the courts were used. So that's the principles. But you can see here that under Section 9, or down at the very bottom there, quite hard to see, under Section, oh, it's not there. Oh, I can't remember where I had that before. But anyway, that was removed in 1986, all right? Now, what has occurred here is that the pilot has been removed, and the, right, I'll just stop the share for a minute because I'm going to go to court documents now. So what we've seen here is that basically what they've done is change the pilot of the plane in 1986, where they threw all the Anglo people out as the pilots, and they put the native Maoris as the pilot of the plane. Now, it's just it's a card trick, really. It was just put some cards up your sleeve and swap them for some other cards. And that's why we're all feeling so powerless. Now, I petitioned to the court now. I want to get to my court now. All right, so I hope I've got everything organised for you. I have to think about a lot of things. So I went, okay, I don't need that. So I want you to keep all of this in mind when we go to the court documents to let you know what I've done. So I petitioned to the court that the 1990 Bill of Rights was repugnant to the 1688 Bill of Rights. That was one. Then I also said that Section 5 KII of the Human Rights, that New Zealand will be bound to any international instruments, which includes all United Nations laws and everything. That's why we just got to pay out $450,000 on that 1990 Bill of Rights. Hundreds of thousands of dollars is going to have to be paid out in compensation. So I said that was repugnant. I said we've got 3 human rights. We've got human rights, 1993. We've got the Bill of Rights, 1990. We've got the 1688 Bill of Rights. And I petitioned the court because I said to them, which one would rule supreme? Which would be the highest law? If these three were conflicting with each other, who would hold the highest law? That's what I wanted to ask the court. So I went into the court, and Palmer J accepted my case, and Palmer J said to the Crown Counsel, you're going to come into the court, you're going to fight this case. Called in Jacinda Ardern and some other ministers, and the court said, you're going to fight this case. The Crown said, we're not coming, and we don't recognise her. She's the village idiot. She's unintelligible. She's the village idiot, and we don't recognise the jurisdictions that she is speaking of. Basically, he all but said, we don't recognise the Queen. At that time, Queen Elizabeth was still alive, and I was petitioning the Queen, but it's kind of worked out good. No offence, Queen Elizabeth, but it has kind of worked out good, because we should really be petitioning the King, not a Queen, because it says King. So anyway, now where am I up to? So Palmer J said to them, I don't accept that you're not coming. I don't accept that your respondents are not coming. And he said, you will come and we will do a timetable of proceedings. We arrived at the court, and the duty judge, this is High Court, by the way, High Court, not the Workers' Court. And Cook J comes in, and he said, and then the Crown Counsel put in a thing called Manic Law. And it is a law that says the government is a corporation. And it says under this government corporation, all corporations must be represented by a solicitor. And the corporation is of right, in their own right, they're in the right to have a solicitor. And since they have a solicitor, then I have to have a solicitor, so that we are equally balanced in the battle, because otherwise they're going to talk to me about things that I'm not going to understand. And then I'm going to say, well, it wasn't a balanced fight because they had a solicitor and I didn't. But the Parliament and the parliamentarians, they are in their right to have a solicitor to represent. But this only applies, you can go back, this does not apply when you're applying for a declaration of right under the 1688. That rule doesn't apply. And why doesn't it apply? Well, it doesn't apply because it says it right here in the Declaratory Judgment Act, that no action or proceeding in the High Court shall be open to objection on the ground that merely a declaratory judgment or order is sought. So that's all I ask for. I'm not prosecuting anybody for money or anything. I only want to know about the meaning of these laws and the repugnancy of them and why they have done that. That is my right as a taxpayer, as a New Zealand subject, a subject of the King. That is my right. And they're not allowed to throw me out, but they did throw me out. Okay, so that's what happened in that court. And then, yes, Betty Broford says they're robbing you and they're corrupt. Now, now this court hearing was only supposed to be, so we're going to go and look at the judgments now. I'll show you some of the judgments. So this was the ruling of Palmer J. So here's Palmer J. And you'll see the ruling here, so you know I'm not lying to you. So there you'll see, there's me, Catherine Sextus, and there's Jacinda Ardern. Right now, she's done nothing wrong because all these laws were written when she wasn't even born. But she's in Parliament at the moment, so that's who you call. But she herself, none of these people have done anything wrong. That's why they're called respondents. They're not called defendants. So they're only respondents, and we're only asking them why did you make this law? Which rights are going to rule supreme when one of them is repugnant? Okay. And so Palmer J turned around and he said, What did he say? Miss Sextus. Miss Sextus, she says, they had asked to throw me out. They had said the statement of claim is unintelligible as it stands and should be repleaded. So he said, you should be going and doing it again. And I said, no. Now, that I told you in another video, be careful about that, because my claim had already been accepted for service by the clerk. It had already been accepted and all the parties had been served. But if you go and rewrite your claim, and if it doesn't pass the process, they might not accept it for service and you'll be thrown out on your ear and they'll never let you back. So I knew that. I was in the court and I better damn well stay there. And so I refused to rewrite the claim, even though the claim wasn't as lovely as what it could have been. But I had 4 causes and I had 4 prayers. So you have to have causes, you have to have prayers. I have 4 causes, I have 4 prayers. So it was an omnibus. So then he says, this is the bit that I wanted to go to. A case management teleconference should be convened by the duty judge in the week of 23rd of May. Here's what's important. He says, for a timetabling of proceedings. A timetabling proceedings. So that's all it was supposed to be, right? So then we come back, and then you've got your Cook J, and then we had Cook J come in, and when Cook J came in, I'm not going to show you all of this because it'll be it's more longer, but Cook J came in and he said, strike out. I got struck out by Cook J, and a lot of the reason that he did put my prayers in, but a lot of the reasons that he threw me out were because of this law here called Matheson v. Slevin and Commissioner of Inland Revenue v. Chesterfield. And those 2 laws set out the criteria of what you need to have if you want to go to the court. Now, this is only if you want to go to the court for against corporations or for compensation, all of that. But as I showed you in that 1908 Declaratory Judgment Act, it doesn't apply if you're not seeking monetary gain or if you're only seeking a declaration. So nobody sought a declaration from the 1688 Bill of Rights or under the will of Mary. Nobody has sought one for more than 47 years. So I'm not sure what kind of went on there, but anyway, they did throw me out. But not only did they throw me out, they right on that day in the timetabling of proceedings, not only did they strike me out for the Manic law that I didn't have a solicitor, but they also prosecuted me back on the one day, and they ordered me to pay $2,700 or $2,400 in costs, all in a timetable of proceedings. So I didn't even get to present my case, which I didn't mind to pay, but I wanted to present my case. But it kept going, God bless. Adorn was around in the 1990s, and yes, she would have known it as her father was head of. Yes, Betty. Yes, her father. So we still got to go into those Adorns, but we're not going in there today because we're only doing the court today. Scotland, Ireland, stay with me because you've got the same plane and the same pilot as what we've got. So you've got to stay with me, and then you'll know I'm talking about the plane and the pilot. So don't go out from me because United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand, we've all got the same pilot, which is the 1688 under the King, and the same plane, which is the 1908 Declaration, our right to petition the King. We've got that same plane for our protections against these barbarous people that want to do bad things to us. So that's important that you know that. Now, what's going to be next that I'm going to be showing you. So then I appealed that to the appeals court. All right, so I appealed it to the appeals court, and the appeal court agreed with me and said to them, you will come to the court, Jacinda Ardern and all of the others. Remember, they're not guilty of anything. They're only just coming to answer my questions about my points of law. So they're not doing anything wrong here, right? So, but we then did get a notice. Now you see here that we did get a notice. Oh. So then what you'll see here is that we did get a notice here. And it just says here, there's me, Catherine Ann Sixtus, Jacinda Ardern, and the other respondents that are just coming to answer a point of law. And then you'll see it says here that the respondents, Jacinda Ardern, Chris Farfoy, Andrew Little, and Ashley Beautiful, give notice of appearance in respect of this appeal. So everybody knows that they have agreed to come to the court. Now then, what happened next? Then, so that was struck out, and it violated the 1908 Declaratory Judgment Act that said that no action and no proceeding in the High Court shall be open to objection if we just want a declaration. So that's where I'm saying that they were wrong. Now we went to the appeal court and they've charged me altogether more than $10,000 to go to the court, which I've already done a video. And so they did that under, now, this is going to be because, remember the plane of the 1908, and then 1975 came along and they threw us out the plane and they put the New Zealand Maori into the plane as the pilot, right, threw us out. Then they made a new law they made two laws. One law was in the appeals court, which said that if you wanted to petition for a declaration, you would need to have a group and you would need to have public interests and you needed to be an organisation that was working in the public interest. So you had to be from the Human Rights Commission or from the Workers' Rights Commission, but all of those agencies only work within the Immigrant 1990 Bill of Rights. They don't do constitutional law. So it's actually, by that law there, they made it impossible for anyone to go to the court using the pilot of the 1688. Now, so I appealed that and I said under the 1688 that it's the right to petition the king and all commitments and all prosecutions. So they prosecuted me back and they're making me pay to defend that. Yes, so that is in violation of the 1688 Bill of Rights that says they're not allowed to do that. 1688 Will and Mary, imperial law, right? So I appealed to Judge Brown, and Judge Brown turned around and he put that law, law that said you had to be a group and you had to have public interest organisation. He put that pilot into my aeroplane of the 1908 Declaratory Judgment Act. So the pilot used to be the 1688, but they threw that out for me, not for the Maori though, only for the Anglo people. They threw it out and they replaced it with the human rights. So they've changed the pilot. You can see the quick tooth bow that they've got here. So you've got your king, who is the pilot, Queen Victoria is the pilot of the 1688. You've got your German ordinances, Scottish ordinances that says that we're subjects protected. Then you've got your 1908 Judicature Act for Supreme Court and Declaratory Judgment Act, which is the plane to go to the Supreme Court with the Queen and the subjects, so that you can think of the Queen being the pilot and the subjects are sitting in first class. That's where she's sitting us, right? And then the planes, as the plane's driving along, what did they do? They came in 1975. They threw out all the passengers, all right? They threw all those first-class passengers out, Anglo's passengers out, and they added a second pilot, which is the Maori pilot. And in 1986, they threw out the Anglo pilot. They only kept the Maori pilot with the Queen, right? And then in 1993, they brought in a new pilot for the Anglo people, which was the 1990 Bill of Rights, which is a very heinous document, and lumped us in with all the refugees calling us non-Maori. And then they gave us a new pilot. So they said, you're not going to be allowed to have this pilot anymore. It's got a new pilot. And that's what you've all been following, the new pilot. But I went into the court. Yes, I did. I went in there and I said, there are actually several reasons why I went in there, because I did say the 50% Parliament. I did say the Marsden Point. I did say the LexisNexis is waterboarding us with laws and many other things, but I won't have time to talk about that today, Betty, but I did. But today we're learning about pilots and planes. So what they had done, they threw out all those, they kept the passengers, but they threw out that Anglo, the German ordinances and the Scottish ordinances, all of those that made us subjects as the pilots of the plane. They threw that pilot out and they put the United Nations pilot in together with the New Zealand Maori is what they did. God knows how I'm going to explain this in the court, but I'm going to do my best. Now, so then, so that's where we're up to. Now, I'm going to show you. So that basically what they've done is change the pilot. So now we're almost at the end of the video. So I just want to show you where we're up to so far. Okay, so for those of you that are watching on YouTube that can't see, I'm going to be posting it later. So I have actually, so then I'm going to show you some various papers to just let you know that, because you've been lied to for so often, that I want to let you know. So Judge Brown, now I'm back to, sorry, I've changed it wrong. Judge Brown put in a new pilot into the plane, but he also did something sneaky. He said, you're a citizen and you're not a subject. So he's basically taken away my right to petition the king, because he said, you're not a subject. And so my whole battle has changed now into being a battle to say, I'm a subject. You can force me to be a citizen, but you can't force people to be a subject of the king, and you can't force people to not be a subject of the king. So our whole battle changed there. I better come and show you that before. So here's Judge Brown. And so Judge Brown came back. Now, this is all in the court documents. And you can see what he said here. Right, I'll go to share. Now, Judge Brown, so he said that I put forward he said that I had put forward the Declaratory Judgments Act 1908, S3, right? But he didn't put in my 1688 pilot. He removed it. The 1688 pilot says only by myself can go. But he put in his pilot of Regulation 54 that said, one, it said I had to pay to go, and two, it said I had to be a group. And 3, it said I had to have a government-funded organisation to approve my petition in order to get into the court. So he took his pilot and put it in my plane, and he took my pilot and removed it. Now, this just goes right back to the barons in the Magna Carta. It goes right back to there where they said you have to go through the barons, and then the barons will come to the courts, and then the courts will come to the kings, and then the kings will go to the religious leaders. That's all what they did, but that's not, we're supposed to, under God, we can go by ourselves. So he put in his new pilot. Not only did he do that, he said that Mayor Sextus had referred to aspects of her heritage and annexed the ordinance. He did not put that I had said that I was a subject of Her Majesty directly by that ordinance. He should have done that, but he didn't. And then he turned around and said, you are a citizen like everyone else, and you will pay like everyone else. Now, that is not what the 1688 Bill of Rights. So in order for him to make that ruling, he had the plane of the Declaratory Judgment Act, right? He took out my pilot of the 1688. He put in a new driver of the 2016 court rules, which said all the conditions that I have to fly the plane. And he said, your plane can't fly because of these things. These are the conditions of your boarding pass for your plane to fly, and you're not allowed to fly it, he said. And then not only that, he went down to the next bit, and then he said, you're no longer a subject, and that's why you can't use that pilot. You're now a citizen, and we've given you a new pilot, and we are ordering you to be driving the plane by that pilot. And if you're not able to drive the plane by that pilot, we're not going to let you petition to the court. That's what he's saying. So I have petitioned that to the Supreme Court on 2 very important issues. The main issue being that it's my right to petition to the king. So that we can have a look here. I just want you to all to see, because I want you to know that I'm not bullshitting you, and I haven't made a video for a while, so I'm wanting you to see where we are up to. You'll see me going quiet quite a lot, and you'll think, oh, where's that Kate Floss going? But what is happening is I'm trying to break down the barriers in the court so that you can all go to the court. We're trying to beat the Mannix law. We're trying to beat the fees. We've got to beat those 2 things, because even if I paid all the money, I'd only be able to make one case. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to take these governments to court for all the horrible things. So we've got to get past these issues first and get back under the protections of the king and get the right pilot back in the right plane. That's what we've got to do. So you see here that we put everything in. That's all gone in. We start down here with the lower court ruling of the strike. Then we respond to the application. Then we do the lower court judgment. And then we've done our memorandum. This is all the things. Then the lower court claim. Then we go into the appeals court. Then the appeals waiver, and then the appeals court fees, and then which was declined. And then finally we go to leave to the Supreme Court of New Zealand. And when we go to the Supreme Court of New Zealand, go to the Supreme Court of New Zealand, and what you're going to see here is the application to the Supreme Court. Now, my application is going to be all changed. See, when you get in the court, you have to be prepared for everything that they're going to throw at you. But I'm very determined to finish this. So when we go to the Supreme Court, it's going to be a bit different, because now Jacinda Ardern and the original respondents are not an issue. So there you keep them, and they're just kept there. Things we didn't know at the start. Oh, yeah. All right. So Jacinda Ardern and all of those, we just keep them down in the original High Court, and the battle has now changed to be between the judges and me. So I'm no longer fighting Parliament. So I've got here, the first respondent was Cook J, because he's the one that struck me out in just a timetable of proceedings. So he's the first one. And he said, you have to pay. Now that's very interesting that he said, oh, you have to pay, because under the Declaratory Judgments Act, I don't have to pay. Hang on a minute. So here's the one that threw me out on the Declaratory Judgments Act. And then I am thinking that he could not throw me out based on the Manic Law, because I'm thinking that under this it says no action or proceeding in the High Court shall be open to objection on the ground that you're only looking for a declaratory judgment. So no action can be made, in my opinion, just in my opinion, but that's one of the reasons. So then you see we've got Cook J, and then the next one that we've got is J.C. McGrath, who is the person who turned me down based on the 2016 court rules that you needed to have a group. And then I appealed that to the proper judge, Brown J, and he's the one that removed my pilot and put in his pilot into the plane, and then he removed my subject status. He says, you're a citizen and you're not allowed to be. Yeah, you don't have to pay for asking questions, because if they made the laws correctly, you wouldn't have to go to the court to ask them questions of the law. The laws should be written in a way that we all can understand them and respect them. So you know that I've called them all to the court, and then what you'll see here, now I've written quite a lot here, and I'm not going to share all of it, but I will share just this tiny little bit to you. Now you see here that I've said that it is the right of the subjects to petition the king, and all commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. And not only that, under the High Court rule, the highest court rule, it says there that all matters, of course, are at the discretion of the courts. But in Section 3, it says the provisions of any act override subclauses 1 and 2. That means if you've got provision in the 1688 Bill of Rights that says that all commitments and prosecutions are illegal, that means that should override their costs. So that's what we take into the court. Now, I had to go through and do all the cases, and sure, I've got all the things in there, Betty. You can't see it, but you'll know when I put it. Yes, they're breaking their own laws. Yes, there are. Betty said they're breaking that. They are breaking law after law after law after law. And then, you know why they're doing it? Because they removed the pilot of our plane, and they knew that we didn't have a driver. They gave us a different driver, and we weren't able to get into the court with that driver. And I keep coming in and throwing their driver out and putting mine in, and they keep coming back and throwing my driver out and putting their driver in. That's what they're up to. Now, so then I did say to him, it's quite funny. We'll read this funny little piece that I said, each court Cook J, J.C. McGrath, Brown J, in their final rulings, have removed the Bill of Rights 1688, which is the driving pilot, and they only considered the vessel, which was the Declaratory Judgment Act, which is a plane with no pilot. So they removed my pilot, and then all they gave me, all they allowed me, for me, was the plane with no pilot. When they got my plane with no pilot, Brown J then put his Red Baron pilot, Regulation 5.4, which requires a group in my S3 plane of the declaratory judgment, which requires only one person, and he crashed my plane in the Court of Appeal. We thought that was funny. Yes, they are so corrupt. So basically, I had a pilot. My pilot says I can go by myself and I don't have to pay any money. And then they put in their Red Baron pilot, and they said you have to have a group, and you also have to pay lots and lots and lots of money. And because of that, my plane crashed down. So I've come back to the court, and they said that I'm not a subject. Don't worry about all that stuff there. They said, you're not a subject. So I'll see if I can find the last piece. So I had to hurry to get this in, and I wasn't able to finish it exactly beautifully and clearly. But I did say that I do pray. Now I'm asking for a new declaration. Now I've said I do pray a declaration. Have a listen. I've got a new pilot, and so since we got struck out in the first one under the Queen, now we're in Supreme with a king, a real king. Can you believe it? So we got a new pilot, and I'm able to ask for a brand new declaration about the king, that no commitments. So the first one, in the first ruling under the Queen, I was saying that they are repugnant. But this is different, because when it went to the appeals court, it was all about money. But the 1688 says there will be no commitments to go to the court. You should not have to pay them to go to the court to question laws that were made in Parliament, because we already pay by our taxes. So I said, I do pray a declaration in the name of His Majesty King Charles Philip Arthur George, the Protestant defender of the faith, His Majesty King Charles Rex III. I request his royal concurrence that effectual provisions for the settlement of certain settlers or ordinances, 1839 to 1865, which are acts of Parliament for the protections of Protestant people, will continue to be part of the liberties of this kingdom, because we've got a kingdom now, not a queendom, so that the same for the future might not be in danger again of being subverted. Now, this comes from the 1688 Bill of Rights. It says that if you ever think that your laws are in danger of being subverted, if they're changing your pilot, you can come and make a petition to the king so that your laws will not be in danger anymore. And so that's what I've said. I do claim, demand, and insist in my prayer that it is the right of the subjects to petition the king, and all commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. I, Catherine Ann Sextus, do declare myself a subject of King Charles Rex III, annexed by the law of 1844. This is the German Settlers Act. Well, he will be accepted. We have a king. He will. Someone said, I won't say who, but somebody said that King Charles will not be accepted. Well, he will be accepted when they get my declaration, because my declaration will be the first declaration by a king, by a proper king, in 47 years. It'll be the first declaration that directly uses the 1688 Bill of Rights, that it is the right of the subjects, which is me, moi, right of the subject to petition the king, and there shall be no commitments or prosecutions for doing so. Now let's just see, if I get my petition, you're all going to be allowed to go to the court. Everyone's going to be allowed to go to the court. Every time they violate your godly status, your godly innate right as a subject that exists on this earth, every time they violate that, you're going to be able to go to the court, and you don't have to pay for it with our pilot and our plane. Now, so let's just see. So then everybody will love King Charles when they find out what they're going to be able to do under King Charles. But anyway, even if we don't have King Charles, we'll have King William. Now go to here, and I'll show you that I have received, so far, I have received the court receipt, which is here. You'll see the court receipt, and my case number is all on there, and there's my court, and I have to pay $0 presently for the Supreme Court. But they have fees too, and so I've had to challenge their fee waivers as well. So I'm going to have to be challenging their fee waivers. And then I do have a letter from J.C. McGrath, and J.C. McGrath has said, pursuant to of the Court of Appeal, I shall extend the date by which the case on appeal and application for hearing need to be filed. So we are extended until from the 29th of September to the 31st of October. Now, 31st of October is a very auspicious date. The 31st of October was the day that Martin Luther went and hammered his petition on the door of the Catholic Church to say, we don't want to go through you and your indulgences anymore. We want to go directly to God, directly to the King, and make our petitions on our own. And he did that on the 31st of March in the year 1520 or 1517, thereabouts. That's Martin Luther. So I'm going to be right up there with Martin Luther. So we're going to wait for the Supreme Court to let us know if they're going to allow me to continue with my petition. We'll see if they're going to allow me to continue with my petition. The good thing is I've not been thrown out of the Supreme Court presently, and I had a friend of mine that took the Declaration of Independence. He took the Declaration of Independence together with the 1990 Bill of Rights, which is a false, it's a pretended title of the Crown. I'll tell you, it is, if ever there was a pretended title of the Crown, that 1990 Bill of Nothings is the pretended title of the Crown. And they removed my pilot of 1688 and they put in that pretended title of the Crown. Now, he went into the court with the pretended title of the Crown, 1990 Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. And he got caught in the fees waivers, just like me. And when he put it into the Supreme Court to appeal against his fee waiver declination, he was thrown out on the first day. So we're counting the days. I put this in on the 29th, and we're now on the 3rd. So we're 4 days in. We haven't heard from them. The longer that we don't hear from them, the better it's going to be. So I'm going to be over the next, I'm going to finish up this video. It's quite some time. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm going to be over the next couple of weeks making videos for you to explain to you about Germany, Scotland, Ireland, and we've all, Germany, Scotland, Ireland, England, Australia, and New Zealand, not America. America's got a whole pilot of their own. Canada's got a whole pilot of their own, right? So it's only our 5 countries. Also, well, there are a few others in there, Gibraltar, Wales, we've got the same plane and the same pilot. And why aren't you able to get into the court, to the higher courts? Because they've removed your pilot of your plane and they've replaced it with a pretended title of the Crown, a new pilot. And that new pilot includes that you have to be a group and you have to pay a lot of money. And nobody's able to pay that money because we're all just poor peons, serfs, slaves. None of us have got the monies to take our parliaments to the court and hold them to account for the laws that they make. So we've got to be talking about all those countries, how it all started, and we're going to be singing. I'm going to be singing a lot of songs while we're waiting for the Supreme Court to let us know if they're going to let my case go into the Supreme Court. If they're not going to let it go into the Supreme Court, because they might want to make me pay fees, $1,100 as well, I'll have to petition against that. So I've put in for a fee waiver at the Supreme Court, and I've said to them that I have the right to petition the King and all commitments are illegal, and I'm waiting for 2 answers. One answer, I'm waiting to see if they will accept my case that appealed. The appeals court appealed the appeals court and appealed the strikeout in first court. So that's going to be one. Second, we're waiting that I've put in for a fee waiver, and it's the whole same situation. And we're going to see if they're going to decline or they're going to let it. Now, if they decline the fee waiver, then by the registrar, I then get to appeal that to a proper Supreme Court judge that will look at what the registrar did. And if my petition to appeal to Supreme Court also gets struck out, I think, I'm not sure, but I think the next stop would either be the Commonwealth or Westminster itself, because my covenant is directly with Queen Victoria. My covenant is not with the New Zealand Maori or with anyone else, but I can take it all to Westminster, I think. So let's all wait and see what everybody comes up with. We did have a few comments here I didn't answer, but I'll just go ahead and read. I like to read them. Betty says it's pointless if who you are under is corrupt. Yes, exactly. We've got corrupt court system, a corrupt Governor General, you've got corrupt parliaments. That is exactly why. But usually if they're corrupt, you should be allowed to go to the court and that will fix it and they will not be corrupt after that. But when they've found a way to change your pilot and stop you from going to the courts, they've had a free hand for 1986, for 30, 40 years, they've had a free hand, and this is the result. This is what you're experiencing. They're trying to decolonize, and what they're meaning by decolonize is change the pilot of the plane to be the United Nations, which is owned by America and Bill Gates. So that's what they're doing. That's why I'm saying to you, they are corrupt. Yes, Betty, that is correct. We can see everything clearly. Thank you, Maxine. Betty, I was told the Queen's been gone out of New Zealand since 1986. The Crown Commence Corporation took over. Well, we've just found a law that's called an estoppable, and I'm not going to talk about that today, but it's just a new law that I found. There's many laws to protect us, and the estoppable says that they can't, what was promised to us by an act of Parliament in 1844, they can't renege on it. They're not permitted to. But what they've done is they've forced most of the Anglo people to leave, and they've imported 3 million immigrants who are not of subject status, and it's those people that are running the show right now. But they couldn't do anything until one of us calls on it. So the subjects have got to go and call for their declarations. They've prevented us from doing that, and we're fighting that now. So once we get that done, it's going to be open season for all of you. Okay, so let's just get this fixed up, Betty. We're going to fix up that 1986 because it was illegal. It was done illegally in the middle of the night. So, you know, everything, all good things take time. Betty Brofer, it's a bait and switch. Yes, Maxine says it's a bait and switch. Yes, it is. It's definitely a bait and switch. She's doing well. It's okay. It's a head. I don't know. Very good, Betty. Kate, you shouldn't need a solicitor. They're robbing you. They're so corrupt. It's confusing by design. Yes, they've deliberately made it confusing, but they never planned on Kate Floss coming along. I've been teaching for 30 years, and one of the things that I've had to do is when I started teaching in the grade 3, I wasn't able to teach them. So what I had to do was go back to the very beginnings, to even when they even first started speaking, to figure out how the language developed so I could get to learn how to teach them. And I did the same thing here. We went back over every single thing, and then we went all the way back, and then we started and placed it all step by step, and then now we're in the matrix, and we're going to be able to do it. Listening to you, you're going well, following along. Really, in 1986, New Zealand gone, not the corporation. Keep going, Kate, says Arapa Mackie. Thank you, Arapata. I hope I say that right, dear. And says, God bless, thank you. And then Betty Broford says, Ardern was around in the 1990 Bill of Rights. Well, it's going to be very interesting because Jeffrey Palmer wrote the 1990 Bill of Rights, and Justice Palmer was my first court judge. And then Lord Cook was involved with the Manic Law and needing to have a solicitor to go to the court, and he was fighting against that way back in 1976, I think. And it was his son, Cook J, that struck me out because of it. So you've got the two supremest, most famous judges in New Zealand, Jeffrey Palmer and Lord Robin Cook, who was the only New Zealand Supreme Court judge who became a lord in England, the only one ever. And then you've got the two sons of those two judges turning up in my court. The court of Kate Floss turned up there. Who would even believe that? So there they've turned up in my Kate Floss court and threw me out. Well, one didn't and one did. One said you can stay and one said you got to go. And then we've got Justice Brown. I'd have to go and look at his ancestry in McGrath. But now we're going to be going to the Supreme Court. So everybody's here, the Ardurns, the Cooks, the Browns, the Cooks, the Palmers, they're all in the court with Kate Floss, you see. And I am descended from Sixtus of Rheims, the man who built the bishop of the first Catholic Church was a Sixtus, and I've changed to be a Protestant. So I'm in there, and one of the popes, Pope Sixtus, had dealings with an Ardern way back in the 1500s in the time of Martin Luther. So we're all here. All of us are here. And so there's something, it's a holy war going on. There's a holy war going on in the courts of New Zealand with Kate Floss and Oreo T. Now let's see. I better say a nice word for Maxine. Maxine did a great deal of work and found me a lot of very interesting things. So she's the one that sent me a case. When I went and looked at it, that's when I found out that the Supreme Court does have a law that other acts can override the costs of the court. So I got that from Maxine. So I bet credit where credit is due. Then Betty Bovard said you originally went to them to ask the question of the causes of your stress. So instead of relieving your stress, they're causing you more stress. That shows how corrupt they are. Well, listen to me, Betty. People are committing that word there. They're at the end of their tether. They don't know. Now, this is why we've always had this release of the courts, that you should be able to go to the courts because you should never, end your life or anything like that over what they're doing. We're going to get through this. We've fought these wars for hundreds and upon hundreds of years, and we'll fight them again. And all we've got to do is just figure out what our tools are. We figure out what our tools are for battle and what our shields are. Where's our sword? Where's our shield? Figure out where they are. And then once we figured out the battle lines, we'll be able to sort out the stress, because they should never stop people going in the court. Betty says, terrible how they're so corrupt, and sorry to hear this. Don't worry, Betty, because I'm coming out swinging. If you can get a ruling, listen to me. If you can get a ruling and a declaration for the king in a Supreme Court of Law, it's the Holy Grail. If you get it in the High Court, they can appeal it. You get it in the appeals court, they can appeal it. And whoever wins at Supreme is the Supreme winner. And the ball just kept getting put in my hand to get to the Supreme, and it's never been put in their hand for them to get to the Supreme. If I can get a Supreme Court ruling that it is the right to petition the king and all commitments and prosecutions are illegal, if I get that, nobody on this earth for all times to come can ever take that away from the people of New Zealand, ever. So don't worry, Betty. This is all going according to the heavenly plan. We've got Queen Elizabeth watching over us. We've got Tamati Wakanene watching over us. We've got Queen Victoria watching over us, not Jacinda Ardern, she's not watching over us. We've got Jesus watching over us. We've got Queen Victoria watching over us, and we've got King Charles Rex III watching over us. So they're all watching over us in the heavenly realm, and they're all with us, and we're exactly where we're supposed to be. So this has been a fantastic fight. I'm having fun. 1688 Bill of Rights, it's ended up very advantageous in one way to look at Betty. Just talk to Betty. Things we didn't know at the start. Yeah. Agree, Maxine. The rabbit burrows by their design. Yes, don't give up. Don't pay. You don't have to pay for asking questions. That's right. And it clearly says that in the Declaratory Judgment Act that they're not allowed to object to you asking just a question. And the 1688 says they're not allowed to make you pay for doing that either, because we already pay them, you know. They're breaking their own laws. They're so corrupt. Yes, Kate, we are in the Supreme with the King. Maxine knows. And then they reckon he won't last long, she says about the King. I bet they spoke to Daddy about it for advice. Betty, she's not a lover of the King. But anyway, we need the King. All right, so I'm going to hang up this video now, people. But that's all what's going on. So keep watching the next ones. I'm going to be singing you some songs from Scotland, Ireland, from Germany, from England, and from New Zealand. I'm going to be singing you songs from all of them and let you know how we're all connected. You've got to know what's going on. Germany's rising up now, right? Russia's gone against America, and then this is our little fight, but we've got to just remember what the battle lines are. Stand together, be strong. See you later. Kate Floss signing out. All right, I'm going to... Oh, my gosh. Do you know what? I didn't record it. Oh, I was supposed to record it. Going to have to make this whole video again. Right, if anyone wants to leave, I'm going to end the live stream, and I didn't record it. I'll record. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to record. Tomorrow I'll do a video recording, and I'll put up all the documents, and I'll leave all the stuff out. But since you've already watched this video, right? And then when I put up the video tomorrow of the Zoom, which I was supposed to record, I didn't record, and I've just wasted 2 hours. Oh my gosh.
No.
Eh? No, because it doesn't show the documents, but it might be on Facebook. Is it on Facebook? Oh, it's not. No. Okay, I'll turn it off. All right, I'll see you later, YouTube. That's ended.